The eviction notice hit the windshield like a slap, pinned under a wiper blade already frozen to the glass. Chen sat in the driver's seat of her 2005 Honda Accord, engine off to save the last eighth tank of gas, watching her 6-year-old daughter Emma trace patterns in the frost on the rear window. 3 days until Christmas. $15 in her checking account. And now this. 72 hours to vacate the premises or face forcible removal by the county sheriff. She'd known it was coming. 2 months behind on rent after the hospital bills from Emma's pneumonia had consumed what little savings existed. The landlord had been patient, then annoyed, then coldly professional in his warnings. But knowing something was coming didn't make the reality any easier to swallow. Maya crumpled the notice with numb fingers, stuffed it into the glove compartment already overflowing with unpaid bills and final warnings, and tried to remember how to breathe. Emma's voice came small from the back seat. "Mama, are we going to Grandma's house for Christmas?" The question pierced deeper than the December cold seeping through the car's failing weather stripping. Maya's mother had died 3 years ago. Cancer that moved fast, left deaths faster. Emma sometimes forgot, or maybe she was just hoping that loss could somehow reverse itself if she asked the right way. "No, baby, but we'll figure something out. We always do." The lie tasted familiar, worn smooth by repetition. Maya had been 23 when Emma was born, 24 when Emma's father decided fatherhood looked better in theory than practice, and disappeared to Portland with his new girlfriend and all their joint savings. She'd managed alone for 6 years through grit and multiple jobs and the kind of determination that felt more like survival instinct than choice. Until 3 months ago, when the textile factory where she'd worked quality control for 5 years shut down without warning. Corporate restructuring, the letter said. Offshore manufacturing, better profit margins, regrettable but necessary. 200 people in Lawrence, Massachusetts, suddenly unemployed in an economy that didn't have room for textile workers anymore. Maya had applied everywhere. Retail, restaurants, warehouses, cleaning services. But December hiring was sparse, and single mothers with no college degrees competed against hundreds of others in identical situations. The unemployment checks barely covered food, definitely didn't cover rent. She'd sold everything worth selling. The TV, her mother's jewelry, furniture piece by piece until their apartment held only mattresses on the floor and plastic lawn chairs in the kitchen. Then she'd sold the mattresses, then the chairs. Now they had sleeping bags and a camping stove and the distinct feeling of circling a drain. The phone in her pocket buzzed. Text from her former co-worker, Denise. "Saw a listing might interest you. Government auction. Weird stuff, but cheap. Link below." Maya clicked the link more from boredom than hope. The site loaded slowly on her dying phone battery. Industrial property auction. Foreclosed commercial buildings, abandoned lots, seized assets for bankruptcies and estate sales. Most of it was junk. A collapsed warehouse in Worcester requiring environmental remediation. A burnout restaurant in Lowell with foundation damage. Strip mall spaces that had been vacant so long they'd become monuments to failed dreams. But one listing made her pause. Former textile processing facility. Haskell Mills, Lawrence, Massachusetts. 2.3 acres. Building approximately 40,000 square feet. Significant structural damage. Sold as is. No warranties. Buyer responsible for all inspection and demolition costs. Starting bid $700. $700 for 40,000 square feet. It was insane. It was also all she had left. Maya clicked through the sparse photos. A massive brick building, 4 stories tall, windows mostly broken or boarded. Part of the roof had collapsed inward, creating a gaping wound visible even from street level. Graffiti covered the lower walls. Chain-link fencing surrounded the property, sagging and torn in places where people had forced entry. The building had been a feather pillow factory, according to the description. Haskell Mills operated from 1947 to 2008, processing duck and goose down, manufacturing pillows and comforters and insulated jackets. When synthetic materials became cheaper, the factory couldn't compete. It had sat empty for 15 years, deteriorating through New England winters and spring floods, until the holding company went bankrupt and the property ended up in municipal seizure for unpaid taxes. Maya read the fine print. Auction ends December 23rd at midnight. Winning bidder must pay in full within 48 hours. Property transfer within 30 days. Emma had fallen asleep in the back, wrapped in every jacket and blanket they owned. Her breath fogged in the cold air, but her face looked peaceful, trusting that her mother would figure this out the way she always did. Maya stared at the factory photos on her phone screen. This was insanity. Buying a collapsed building with money she desperately needed for food and gas. But the alternative was what? Living in a car through a Massachusetts winter? Shelters that were already overcrowded? Foster care for Emma while Maya tried to stabilize, a prospect that made her chest tighten with primal fear? At least the building had walls. At least it was shelter of some kind. And if nothing else, if it was completely unusable, maybe she could salvage materials, sell scrap metal, copper wire, anything valuable left behind. $700 invested in possibility versus $700 stretched across 2 weeks of survival that still ended in homelessness. She placed the bid at 11:47 p.m. on December 20th, sitting in the Walmart parking lot where they'd been sleeping for 3 nights. Phone at 4% battery, hands shaking so badly she nearly dropped it twice. The screen refreshed. High bidder, Chen. Time remaining, 51 hours. No one else was bidding. Why would they? The building was worthless, a liability, the kind of property municipalities couldn't give away because demolition costs exceeded any conceivable value. But to Maya, sitting in a frozen car with her sleeping daughter and an eviction notice, worthless looked like the only option left. The hours crawled by. Maya checked the auction obsessively, expecting someone to outbid her, some rational person who saw value she'd missed. But the number stayed the same, $700. Her bid, unchallenged. December 23rd arrived cold and gray, the kind of weather that pressed down on Lawrence like a weighted blanket. Maya woke to Emma coughing, that wet sound that meant her lungs were struggling again. She felt her daughter's forehead. Warm, not burning, but definitely feverish. They needed to get indoors. Needed heat and stability and medicine Maya couldn't afford. The auction closed at midnight. Maya watched the countdown on her phone, parked outside a 24-hour diner where they bought 1 cup of coffee and 2 glasses of water and stretched them across 4 hours. The staff didn't hassle them. They recognized desperation when they saw it. At 11:59, the screen refreshed one final time. Auction ended. Winner, Chen. Amount, $700. Property, Haskell Mills, 847 Canal Street, Lawrence, Massachusetts. Maya had just bought a collapsed factory with almost every dollar she had left. Emma stirred, coughing again. Mama, where are we? Getting ready to go home, baby. We have a home. The question broke her. Yeah, sweetheart, we have a home. Even if that home was a condemned building with a collapsed roof and broken windows and probably rats and water damage and 1,000 problems she couldn't begin to solve. At least it was theirs. The payment processing happened the next morning at a municipal office that smelled like old coffee and bureaucratic resignation. The clerk, a woman in her 50s with tired eyes and a Lawrence Community College sweatshirt, processed the transaction with the mechanical efficiency of someone who'd done this too many times. You know the building's in terrible shape, right? There's a reason no one else bid. Maya signed the forms with hands that had stopped shaking through sheer force of will. I know. There's no power, no water, probably structural damage throughout. The roof collapse alone makes it dangerous. I understand. The clerk studied her face for a long moment, saw something there that made her sigh. You got kids? 1 daughter. 6 years old. Jesus. She stamped the deed with more force than necessary. Look, I'm not supposed to say this, but there's an emergency assistance program through the city. They help families in crisis. You should apply. I've applied. Waiting list is 9 months long. Yeah. The clerk handed over the deed, the keys on a rusted ring, and a folder of documents. Well, congratulations. You own a piece of Lawrence's industrial history. Such as it is, The drive to the factory took 11 minutes through streets Maya knew too well. Past the shut-down textile plants that had once employed thousands. Past the apartment building she was being evicted from, her former landlord's car visible in his designated spot. Past the hospital where Emma had spent 3 terrifying days in November and Maya had watched the bill climb into numbers that made her physically ill. Canal Street ran parallel to the Merrimack River, lined with abandoned industrial buildings that spoke to Lawrence's past as a textile powerhouse. Haskell Mills sat near the end, separated from neighboring properties by chain-link fence and decades of neglect. The building looked worse in person than in the auction photos, which Maya hadn't thought possible. For stories of dark red brick, stained by weather and time. Windows on all floors either broken out completely or covered with plywood that had warped and rotted. The main entrance was boarded shut, graffiti declaring the space property of various street gangs who'd probably abandoned it years ago when even squatting became too dangerous. The roof's collapse was visible from the street. An entire section of the northeast corner caved inward, exposing structural beams and sky. Emma pressed against the car window, eyes wide. That's ours. That's ours, baby. It looks scary. Maya couldn't disagree. Sometimes home looks scary before it looks safe. But we'll make it work. They got out, breath fogging in the December air. The keys felt heavy in Maya's hand. Oversized industrial keys on a ring labeled simply Haskell Mills, Maine. The chain-link gate stood partially open, torn where someone had forced entry years ago. They walked through, their footsteps crunching on frozen weeds and broken glass. Up close, the building's decay was even more apparent. Foundation cracks wide enough to fit fingers into. Mortar crumbling between bricks. Wooden window frames rotted to the point of being structural liability rather than barrier. But the walls still stood. That had to count for something. Maya found the main entrance, a steel door that had been welded shut at some point, then cut open by whoever needed access badly enough. She pulled it open with both hands, hinges screaming protest. The interior space beyond was dark, cold, and smelled of mildew and something else. Something organic and abandoned, like the building itself was slowly composting. Stay close to me. Maya clicked on her phone's flashlight, the beam cutting weak illumination through heavy darkness. They stepped inside. The main floor stretched vast and empty, columns rising every 30 feet to support the ceiling or what remained of it. Daylight filtered through gaps in the roof where the collapse had opened the building to sky. Puddles of frozen water reflected their flashlight beam. Debris covered everything. Broken machinery, collapsed conveyor systems, mounds of fabric scraps rotted to the point of being unidentifiable, piles of something that might once have been feathers but now looked like organic sludge. Emma's hand found hers, gripped tight. Mama, this is really our home? This is our building. We'll make it home. The words sounded more confident than Maya felt. They explored carefully, testing floorboards before putting weight on them, avoiding areas where water damage had obviously compromised structure. The first floor held the main processing area where machinery had once sorted and cleaned feathers, stuffed them into ticking, sealed them into pillows. All of it was rusted, broken, useless. The second floor was worse. The roof collapse had devastated this level, dumping tons of material into spaces that now stood impassable with debris. Water damage was extensive, ceilings sagging, floors soft and dangerous. Maya marked it mentally as off-limits, too unstable to risk. The third floor surprised her. Less damaged, more intact, almost as if this level had been spared the worst of the building's deterioration. The spaces here had been offices once, small rooms with desks still in place, filing cabinets rusted shut, calendars on walls frozen in time at dates from 2007 and 2008. The last year of operation. In one office, a space maybe 12 feet by 12 feet, Maya found something approaching usable shelter. The window, though broken, had been boarded from inside with plywood that still held. The floor was solid, no water damage visible. A radiator sat against one wall, obviously non-functional, but at least present. We could stay here, Maya said, more to herself than Emma. Like camping. Emma looked around the dusty, cold office with the careful assessment children develop when they've had to adapt too many times. Can we make it warmer? I'll figure something out. Maya always figured something out. The fourth floor accessed through a stairwell that creaked ominously with every step, held only storage spaces. Rooms filled with boxes of old inventory, rotted pillows and comforters that mice had nested in. More filing cabinets. Furniture too damaged to salvage. And at the far end of a long hallway, a door marked simply, Down Chamber. Authorized personnel only. The door was steel, heavier than the others, with an industrial lock that looked newer than anything else Maya had seen in the building. She tried her keys. The large one didn't fit. Neither did the second or third. But the fourth key, smallest on the ring, slid in smoothly. The lock turned with surprising ease, well-maintained despite the building's abandonment. The door swung inward on hinges that barely whispered. Maya paused. "Stay here a second, Emma. Let me check if it's safe." Beyond the door was darkness deeper than the rest of the building, a quality of black that suggested the space ahead had no windows, no connection to outside light. Maya's phone flashlight seemed insufficient, swallowed by shadow after just a few feet. She stepped through carefully, and her foot found not floor but the top step of a stairway descending. Down, into the building's foundation. She descended slowly, counting steps. 10, 20, 30. The air grew colder, drier, carrying a smell of concrete and metal instead of rot. At the bottom, her flashlight found a light switch. She flipped it without much hope. The overhead fluorescence flickered once, twice, then surged to life with a hum that spoke to electricity still connected, still functioning. Impossible, but undeniably real. The space the lights revealed made Maya's breath catch. She stood in what had clearly been a basement vault, but calling it a basement felt inadequate. The chamber stretched maybe 40 feet by 60 feet, walls lined floor to ceiling with industrial shelving. But these weren't storing rotted fabric and rusted machinery. These were storing something else entirely, organized with obsessive precision, labeled with handwritten cards and plastic sleeves. Maya walked forward slowly, afraid sudden movement might shatter whatever impossible moment this was. The first shelf section held boxes, plastic storage containers stacked 3 high, each one labeled with dates and contents. She pulled one down at random. December 1985, premium white duck down, grade A 50 pounds. The box was sealed with industrial tape. Maya used her keys to cut it open. Inside, wrapped in plastic, preserved in conditions that had prevented rot and decay, was exactly what the label promised. White duck down, fluffy and clean, and perfectly preserved. She moved to the next section. More boxes, more labels stretching back years. October 1983, April 1997, June 2003. Hundreds of boxes, thousands of pounds of premium down, stored and forgotten worth. Maya had no idea what it was worth, but she knew textile materials, knew quality when she saw it, and this was the good stuff. The kind of down that went into luxury bedding and high-end winter coats. But the down was just the beginning. The next section held bolts of fabric, and not just any fabric. Silk, cotton, wool, all premium grade, all vacuum-sealed in plastic, all perfectly preserved. Labels indicated origins: Italian silk, Egyptian cotton, New Zealand wool. Materials that were expensive when new and had probably only appreciated as textile quality declined globally. Maya's hands shook as she opened a seal on one bolt of silk. The fabric spilled out, lustrous even in fluorescent light, undamaged, ready to use. Worth easily $100 per yard, maybe more, and there were dozens of bolts. The far wall held something different. Not fabric or down, but equipment. Industrial sewing machines, still in their original shipping crates. Never opened, never used. The label showed brands Maya recognized, professional-grade machines that cost thousands of dollars each. Beside them, boxes of parts, spools of thread in every color, hundreds of needles, scissors, cutting tools, everything needed for textile production. All preserved, all waiting. And in the corner, almost hidden behind the shelving, Maya found the safe. It was industrial size, the kind banks use for deposit boxes, with a digital keypad glowing red in the dim light. A note was taped to the door, handwritten on yellowed paper. For whoever finds this, the code is my daughter's birthday. August 14th, 1962. What's inside is yours now. Use it wisely. Use it well. Arthur Haskell, 2007. Maya stared at the note, at the safe, at the chamber full of preserved materials worth conservatively. She did quick mental math. At least hundreds of thousands. Maybe more. Possibly much more. Her phone buzzed. 3% battery. Emma's voice drifted down from above, worried. Mama? Are you okay? I'm okay, baby. Stay there. I'm coming up. But before she left, Maya entered the code into the safe's keypad. 08141962. The display flashed green. Locks disengaged with mechanical precision. The door swung open. Inside were shelves of documents. Financial records, property deeds, business licenses. And in the center, a strongbox. Maya lifted it, surprised by the weight. Inside the box, wrapped in cloth, were gold bars. Not huge, maybe a pound each, but unmistakably real. 10 of them. And beneath those, stacks of cash bundled and sealed. She didn't count it, couldn't process what she was seeing. But it was money, physical money, a lot of it. At the bottom of the strongbox was a letter, sealed in plastic. Maya opened it with trembling fingers. To the new owner of Haskell Mills. If you're reading this, then you've purchased this building, probably for almost nothing, because that's all it's worth structurally. The roof collapse in 2006 made the building uninsurable and unsaleable. I've been trying to give it away for years. No one wanted the liability, so I'm doing something different. I'm hiding my life's work where only someone desperate enough or curious enough or brave enough will find it. The down chamber was built in 1972 as climate-controlled storage for our premium materials. When the factory closed in 2008, I sealed everything valuable inside and walked away. My daughter had died. My wife had left. I had no reason to continue, but I couldn't destroy what we'd built. I've spent 50 years in textiles. I know quality. I know value. I know that what's in this chamber represents not just money, but craft, artistry, the last of something that's being lost as everything moves overseas and gets made cheaper and worse. The materials here, if sold properly to people who appreciate quality, are worth approximately $12 million at 2007 market values. Probably more by the time you find this. The gold was insurance against economic collapse. The cash was for emergencies that never came. It's all yours now. Legally, morally, completely yours. I've structured the property transfer to include all contents as is. No estate claims, no family disputes. My lawyer has the documentation. Everything is clean. My only request is this. Don't waste it. Build something with it. Help people with it. Keep textile, craft alive if you can, or at least remember it mattered once. And if you're reading this because you're desperate, because you bought a condemned building with your last dollar hoping for shelter, then you're exactly who I hoped would find this. Welcome home. Arthur Haskell. Maya read the letter 3 times. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. Above her, Emma called again, more worried now. Mama, coming baby. She climbed the stairs on legs that felt disconnected from her body. Emma waited at the top, face worried. Maya knelt, pulled her daughter close, and held on tight while her mind tried to process what had just happened. They'd gambled $700 on a collapsed factory. They'd found $12 million in perfectly preserved textile materials, plus gold, plus cash, plus a dying man's desperate hope that his life's work would matter to someone. Mama, why are you crying? Emma's small hand wiped at tears Maya hadn't realized were falling. Because sometimes things work out, baby. Sometimes they actually work out. Ready for part 2? Please let me know when you'd like me to continue. Continue with part 2, 12:38 p.m. Part 2, 7,000 words. The first night in Haskell Mills, Maya and Emma slept in the 3rd-floor office wrapped in every piece of clothing they owned plus the emergency blankets from the car. The building creaked and groaned around them, settling sounds magnified by emptiness and cold. Wind whistled through broken windows. Somewhere on the 2nd floor, water dripped with metronomic persistence. Emma pressed against her mother's side, breath visible in the flashlight's dim glow. "Mama, is this really better than the car?" The question deserved honesty. Right now? Maybe not. But tomorrow it will be. And the day after that, even better. I promise. Maya had made a lot of promises lately. For the first time in months, she thought she might actually keep them. Sleep came in fragments, interrupted by cold and unfamiliar sounds and the surreal knowledge that $12 million in textile materials sat in a locked chamber below them. Every time Maya closed her eyes, her mind spun through scenarios. What if she'd misread the letter? What if Arthur Haskell's family appeared with legal claims? What if the materials weren't actually valuable? What if this was all some elaborate mistake? But dawn came regardless of her anxiety, gray light filtering through the boarded windows gaps. Emma woke coughing, that wet sound that made Maya's chest tighten. They needed warmth, needed medicine, needed to move faster than caution wanted to allow. Maya left Emma wrapped in blankets and descended to the down chamber. In daylight filtering from the stairwell, the space looked less miraculous and more industrial. Just a basement room with shelves and boxes and one impossible fortune. She photographed everything methodically. The shelves, the labels, Arthur's letter, the safe's contents. Her phone battery died at 1%, but she captured enough. Evidence, documentation, proof this wasn't desperation-induced hallucination. The strongbox held exactly what she'd seen last night. 10 gold bars, each stamped with weight and purity marks. 1 pound .999 fine gold. At current prices, Maya vaguely remembered from news reports, maybe $60,000 in gold. More than she'd made in 2 years at the factory. The cash was harder to count, but the bundles were organized. $100 bills in stacks of 10,000. 50 stacks. $500,000. Just sitting there, waiting. Maya took one bundle, slipped it into her jacket pocket, and locked the safe again. Climbing back upstairs felt like surfacing from deep water, pressure changing, reality shifting. Emma was awake, sitting up, watching the door with worried eyes. "You came back." "Of course I came back, baby. I'll always come back. You were gone a long time. I thought maybe you left like Daddy did." The words hit like a physical blow. Maya crossed to her daughter, knelt, took small, cold hands in hers. "Emma, look at me. I will never leave you. Never. Not for money. Not for anything. We're a team. You understand?" Emma nodded, but 6-year-olds who'd been abandoned once carried that fear permanently. The drive to Walgreens used the last of their gas. Maya bought a space heater, extension cords, children's medicine for coughs, bread, peanut butter, and bottled water. The clerk gave her the total, and Maya handed over a $100 bill. The woman held it up to the light, checking for counterfeits with the casual suspicion of someone who'd seen too many desperate people try too many things. But the bill was real, and the change came back crisp. On impulse, Maya added a small Christmas tree from the seasonal clearance section and a box of ornaments marked down to $3. Emma's face, when she saw them, made every difficult decision worth it. They returned to find the building exactly as they'd left it, which shouldn't have felt like a relief, but did. Maya set up the space heater in their third-floor office, plugged it into an outlet she'd tested earlier, and felt genuine warmth for the first time in days when it actually worked. The building still had electricity. Sporadic, unreliable, probably illegal at this point, but functional. Emma sat wrapped in blankets while Maya set up their tiny tree in the corner, hanging ornaments with care that bordered on ceremony. It was 4 feet tall, plastic, half the lights didn't work, and it was the most beautiful thing Maya had seen in months. "Can we stay here for Christmas?" Emma asked, voice small but hopeful. "We can stay here forever if we want to. This is our building, our home. Even though it's broken, especially because it's broken. Broken things can be fixed, baby. That's what we do. We fix broken things." The next morning, December 26th, Maya left Emma in the warm office with strict instructions not to leave and drove to Lawrence Public Library. She needed internet access, and her phone was dead. The librarian, an older woman with kind eyes and a name tag reading Patricia, showed her to a computer without questions about why she looked like she'd slept in her clothes or why her hand shook typing her password. Maya started with gold prices. Current market value, approximately $1,900 per troy ounce. 16 ounces per pound. Her 10 bars represented roughly $300,000, not $60,000. She'd miscalculated by a factor of 5. Next, she researched premium down pricing. Grade A white duck down, properly cleaned and stored, sold for anywhere from $40 to $80 per pound to manufacturers. Arthur's inventory listed approximately 8,000 pounds. At conservative estimates, that was $320,000. Possibly double that if she found luxury buyers. The fabric made her pause. Italian silk at $200 per yard minimum. She counted at least 100 bolts, each bolt maybe 50 yards. That was $1 million in silk alone. Egyptian cotton, New Zealand wool, Japanese linen, all premium grades, all vacuum sealed and preserved. Another $2 million conservatively. The industrial equipment, still in original packaging, represented obsolete technology in some cases, but collectors' items in others. Vintage Singer industrial machines sold to textile enthusiasts for thousands each. She'd counted 40 machines. Maya sat back from the computer, hands pressed flat against the desk to stop their shaking. Arthur Haskell hadn't exaggerated. If anything, he'd underestimated. The chamber held closer to 15 million than 12. Possibly more if she found the right buyers and took time to maximize value rather than dumping everything at wholesale prices. $15 million. The number was so large it stopped meaning anything, became abstract, lost connection to reality. She couldn't process it, couldn't make it fit into the framework of someone who'd been living in a car 3 days ago. Patricia approached with coffee in a paper cup. "You look like you could use this." Maya accepted it with numb fingers. "Thank you. You okay, honey? You've been staring at that screen like it insulted your mother." "I just found out I might own something valuable. Trying to figure out what to do about it." Patricia nodded slowly. "Well, if it's worth what you think, first thing you do is get a lawyer. Make sure it's really yours. Then you get an accountant. Make sure you don't lose it all to taxes or bad decisions. Then you take a deep breath and remember that money's just a tool. What you build with it matters more than having it." Maya looked up at this librarian, dispensing wisdom like she'd been waiting for exactly this question. "That sounds like experience talking. My husband inherited a settlement when I was young. $100,000 back in 1987. Seemed like all the money in the world. We went through it in 18 months. New cars, bigger house, trips we didn't need. When it was gone, we had nothing to show but debt and regret." She patted Maya's shoulder. "Don't be us. Be smarter." The law office of Rebecca Tan occupied a second-floor suite above a faux restaurant in downtown Lawrence. Maya had found her through an online search for estate lawyers with good reviews and reasonable rates. The receptionist, a young man with kind eyes and MIT sweatshirt, offered Emma crayons and paper while Maya waited. Rebecca Tan herself was 40-something, Vietnamese-American, wearing a blazer that looked expensive but not flashy. She listened to Maya's story without interruption, taking notes in precise handwriting, asking clarifying questions about dates and documentation. When Maya finished, Rebecca sat back in her chair. "Ms. Chen, I need to ask you something directly, and I need you to be completely honest. Is there any possibility this property or its contents were acquired illegally?" "No. I bought the building at a legitimate municipal auction. Everything inside was included in the sale. And you have the deed, the auction records, Arthur Haskell's letter?" Maya handed over the folder she'd assembled. Rebecca read through everything carefully, cross-referencing documents, making notes. After 20 minutes, she looked up. "This is unusual, but not unprecedented. Property contents transfer with the deed unless explicitly excluded. The auction listing said as is, which typically includes everything on the premises. Arthur's letter demonstrates clear intent to gift the contents to the new owner. His estate was settled in 2009, according to these probate records. The building and its contents weren't included because the estate attorney never knew they existed. Arthur hid them deliberately. So it's really mine? Legally, yes. Morally, yes. Practically, Rebecca leaned forward. You're going to face questions. The IRS will want to know where sudden wealth came from. You'll need to pay capital gains taxes when you liquidate. You'll need documentation for everything. And if any distant Haskell relatives surface claiming they deserve a share, we'll need to fight that. How much will this cost? Maya asked, thinking of the $100 bills in her pocket that had seemed like wealth an hour ago. My retainer is $5,000 for this kind of work, but I'm willing to structure payment over time if needed. Or we could discuss contingency, if you prefer. What's contingency? I take a percentage of what we successfully establish as yours. In this case, maybe 3%. That way you don't pay anything up front. Maya did the math quickly. 3% of $15 million was $450,000. A fortune for a few months of legal work. But it also meant Rebecca's interests aligned perfectly with hers. Both of them wanted to establish the highest possible value. Contingency works. They shook hands. Rebecca's grip was firm, professional, reassuring. Okay, first step, we document everything. I'll hire appraisers, textile experts, precious metals authenticators. We build an ironclad case for ownership and value. Then we file with the IRS establishing intent to declare income from asset liquidation. We do everything transparently, proactively, leaving no room for questions. How long will this take? 3 to 6 months minimum. These things can't be rushed. Maya thought about Emma coughing in a cold building, about the space heater that was their only warmth, about winter in Massachusetts. What if I need to access some money sooner? For living expenses? Rebecca considered this. The cash and gold are yours immediately. They were clearly gifts from Arthur, documented in his letter. You can use those for living expenses while we establish value for the textile materials. Just keep receipts for everything. The IRS appreciates good record keeping. That afternoon, Maya sold 2 of the gold bars to a precious metals dealer in Boston who asked few questions and paid in cashier's checks. $58,000. She opened a bank account. The first time in her adult life, she'd had more than 3 digits in savings. The banker, a young woman named Stephanie, processed the deposit with professional courtesy that didn't quite hide her curiosity about a woman in a thrift store jacket depositing nearly $60,000. Maya bought a phone charger first, then a real winter coat for Emma from the North Face outlet, the kind with down insulation that would keep a child warm even if they were living in a building with no heat. Then she bought a portable generator, a case of oil, heavy-duty extension cords, and 5-gallon gas cans. She bought an electric kettle, instant coffee, ramen noodles in bulk, and everything from the pharmacy Emma might need. Medicine, vitamins, bandages, thermometer. The spending felt terrifying and necessary in equal measure. Every dollar going out represented security coming in. That night, powered by the generator humming in the hallway there. Third-floor office was warm enough that Emma could sleep without her jacket. Maya sat with Arthur's letter, reading it again by lamplight, trying to understand the man who'd left this gift. 50 years in textiles. A daughter who died. A wife who'd left. No reason to continue. She understood that loneliness, that specific flavor of loss that made everything else feel meaningless. The next week passed in careful activity. Rebecca's textile expert, a retired professor from the Fashion Institute of Technology, spent 2 days in the down chamber cataloging everything. He emerged looking dazed. Ms. Chen, I've authenticated approximately $14.3 million in premium textile materials. Some of these fabrics aren't made anymore. The silk alone is museum quality. If you liquidate carefully through the right buyers, you could exceed 20 million. 20 million. The number had grown again, become more impossible. But Maya was learning to breathe through the impossibility, to treat it like a problem to be solved rather than a miracle to worship. The precious metals authenticator confirmed the gold's purity and valued it at $304,000 at current market rates. The cash, bundled and sealed, totaled exactly $500,000. Arthur Haskell had been precise in his preservation. Rebecca filed preliminary paperwork with the IRS, establishing Maya's intent to declare income from inherited asset liquidation. She filed documentation with the city, establishing ownership of the building and all contents. She prepared for potential challenges that never came. No Haskell relatives surfaced. No estate lawyers appeared with questions. The transfer was clean, exactly as Arthur had structured it. But winter in Lawrence was brutal, and the factory remained barely habitable. The roof collapse made most of the building too dangerous to occupy. Water damage was extensive throughout the second floor. The first floor flooded every time it rained heavily. Maya and Emma lived in their third-floor office, warm but isolated, camping in a building that needed millions in repairs to be truly safe. Emma started coughing more frequently. The medicine helped, but the environment didn't. Living in a construction zone wasn't sustainable, even with money to make it comfortable. Maya made a decision. In early January, she rented a small house in North Andover, 20 minutes from Lawrence. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, heat that worked, windows without cracks. The landlord required first and last month's rent plus security. $4,500 total. Maya paid in cash, and the woman's eyes widened, but she didn't ask questions. Moving Emma into a real bedroom with a real bed and heat that came from radiators instead of space heaters felt like crossing some threshold back into normal life. That night, Emma slept without coughing, without shivering, without asking if they were safe. And Maya sat in the small kitchen drinking coffee and planning what came next. The factory held their fortune, but it needed work. Extensive work. The kind of renovation that would take months and cost hundreds of thousands. She hired contractors in February, a father-son team named Mike and Danny Reeves who specialized in commercial restoration. They walked through Haskell Mills with her, pointing out problems with the practiced eye of men who'd seen buildings in worse shape. Roof needs complete replacement. We're talking $200,000 minimum. Mike made notes on a tablet. Second floor is a total loss. Structural compromise throughout. We'd have to gut it, reinforce everything, essentially rebuild. First floor is salvageable, but needs extensive work. New windows, new electrical, waterproofing, HVAC system. Danny photographed damage on his phone. And that's just to make it safe. Making it functional, beautiful, the way it could be, you're looking at $1 million, maybe more. Maya thought about the 15 to 20 million sitting in the down chamber. What if money wasn't the limiting factor? What if I wanted to do it right? The Reeves looked at each other, then back at her. Mike spoke carefully. Then we could make this building something special. Preserve the history, honor what it was, turn it into something that serves the community. How long? 8 months to a year. Depends on permits, weather, how many surprises we find once we open walls. Do it. The renovation began in March with demolition. The collapsed roof section came down first, carefully removed piece by piece, salvaging what could be saved. The second floor followed, entire sections removed where water damage had destroyed structural integrity. Maya visited daily, watching the building transform through destruction toward something new. In April, Rebecca called with news. We've been contacted by a luxury bedding company in New York. They heard through our appraiser that you have premium vintage down. They're interested in purchasing the entire inventory. How much? $400,000 for all 8,000 pounds. It's wholesale pricing, but it's guaranteed money, and it clears out a major portion of your inventory. Maya thought about Arthur's letter. Don't waste it. Build something with it. Keep textile craft alive if you can. No. Rebecca sounded surprised. I want to do something different. Can you find me information about textile education programs? Apprenticeships? Ways to train people in skills that are being lost. There was a pause. You want to use premium materials to teach textile crafts. Arthur spent 50 years building this inventory. He called it craft, artistry, the last of something being lost. Selling it wholesale to some company that'll just make expensive pillows feels like missing the point. Rebecca's voice changed, warmed with something like respect. That's unusually thoughtful. Most people finding sudden wealth grab whatever quick cash they can. I've been the person, grabbing quick cash. It doesn't build anything. Over the next month, Maya worked with education consultants to develop a plan. The factory would become a textile arts center. The down chamber materials would supply programs teaching traditional skills. Sewing, pattern making, fabric dyeing, quilting, embroidery, all the crafts that had once employed thousands in Lawrence and were now practiced by almost no one. She partnered with Northern Essex Community College to offer accredited courses. She hired instructors, experienced craftspeople who'd worked in the textile industry before it collapsed. She established scholarships for low-income students, remembering what it felt like to be shut out of opportunities by cost. The renovation accelerated through summer. New roof, gleaming and weatherproof. Second floor rebuilt with the classroom spaces, sewing stations, industrial tables. First floor transformed into studio space with natural light and ventilation. The down chamber remained locked and climate-controlled, now serving as material storage for students. In June, Maya hired her first full-time employee. Carmen Rodriguez, 38, had been laid off from the same textile factory as Maya 3 years earlier. She'd been struggling ever since, working retail and warehouse jobs that paid minimum wage and offered no future. She walked into Maya's temporary office in the factory, looking skeptical and hopeful in equal measure. "I heard you're hiring. Something about teaching textile work. Director of Education. You'd oversee instructors, develop curriculum, manage the apprenticeship program." Carmen stared. "I don't have a college degree. I just know how to sew." "You have 15 years of textile experience. You know quality. You know how things should be made. That's worth more than a degree. What's the pay?" Maya had researched market rates extensively. $60,000 annual salary. Health insurance. 2 weeks vacation. And if you want to take classes yourself, tuition is covered. Carmen's eyes filled. She looked away quickly, composing herself. "Why are you doing this? There's no money in textile education. The industry's dead. The industry changed. Doesn't mean the skills are worthless. People still need to know how to make things, repair things, create things. We're going to teach them. When do I start?" "Tomorrow, if you're ready." Carmen nodded, throat working. "Tomorrow. Yeah, I'm ready." The Lawrence Textile Arts Center opened its doors on September 15th, 9 months after Maya had placed that desperate $700 bid. The building gleamed, restored to something approaching its original glory, but adapted for modern use. Floor-to-ceiling windows let in light. Climate control kept temperature perfect. Machinery hummed with quiet efficiency. The first class had 12 students. Single mothers, mostly women who'd been laid off from factories and retail and service jobs. Women who needed skills and dignity and a path forward. Maya watched them work with premium fabrics Arthur had preserved, their hands learning patterns that had been practiced in this building for 60 years. One student, Patricia Williams, was 43 and had been homeless for 6 months. She'd spent time in shelters and transitional housing in the back seat of a borrowed car. Maya recognized the fear in her eyes, the way she held herself like someone expecting the floor to collapse. After class, Patricia approached hesitantly. "Ms. Chen, I wanted to ask about the scholarship application. I don't have transportation right now, and I'm not sure I can commit to the full program schedule." Maya remembered sitting in a Walmart parking lot, deciding whether to bid on a building she'd never seen. The scholarship covers bus passes. Classes are flexible scheduling. We work around your life, not the other way around. If you want to be here, we'll figure out how to make it happen. Patricia's face crumpled. "I don't understand why you're helping us. People like me, we're used to being told we're not worth the investment. People like you are exactly who this place is for. I was living in my car with my daughter last December. Bought this building with $700 because it was all I had left. Someone gave me a chance. I'm giving you one." "Who gave you a chance?" Maya thought about Arthur Haskell, dying alone, hiding his life's work in a basement, hoping desperately that someone would find it and understand. A man I never met who believed broken things could be fixed if someone cared enough to try. Over the following months, the center expanded. More classes, more students, more instructors. Maya sold portions of Arthur's premium inventory carefully, finding buyers who appreciated quality, who would use the materials for genuine craft rather than mass production. A Japanese textile company purchased the silk for $2.3 million, using it for traditional kimono production. A Norwegian outdoor equipment manufacturer bought half the down for $1.8 million, making expedition-grade sleeping bags and jackets. A collective of American quilters purchased Egyptian cotton for $600,000, creating museum-quality pieces they sold at art shows and galleries. Each sale was strategic, thoughtful, maximizing value while ensuring materials went to people who respected them. By December, exactly 1 year after that desperate auction bid, Maya's accountant tallied the results. Textile sales totaled $11.4 million. After taxes at 47% on capital gains, she cleared $6,042,000. The remaining materials, still in the down chamber, held another $8 million in potential value. The factory renovation had cost $1.3 million. Operating the center for its first year cost $800,000, including salaries, utilities, materials, and student scholarships. Maya had personally spent conservatively. The rented house in North Andover at $2,400 monthly. A reliable used Honda CR-V to replace the dying Accord. Emma's school supplies and activities. Basic living expenses. Maybe $80,000 total. She sat in her office at the center, now beautifully appointed with a desk Arthur Haskell might have used, and looked at the spreadsheet summarizing the year. Net worth. Approximately $13 million in liquid assets, plus the building and remaining inventory. Outcome. 73 students trained in textile skills. 6 full-time employees with living wages and benefits. 1 community center serving a city that desperately needed renewal. Emma knocked on the open door. 7 years old now. Confident in ways she hadn't been a year ago. Mama, Miss Carmen says there's someone here to see you. The visitor was a man in his 60s, gray-haired and weathered, wearing a Red Sox cap and a jacket that had seen decades of use. He stood in the center's reception area, studying the photographs on the wall. Images of the building's history, workers from a 1950s operating machinery, textile production at its peak. Can I help you? Maya asked. The man turned. His eyes were red-rimmed, emotional. I'm James Haskell, Arthur's nephew. Maya's stomach dropped. This was it. The legal challenge Rebecca had prepared for. Family member claiming Arthur's materials should have gone through probate. Mr. Haskell, I have a lawyer. If you're planning to contest ownership, no. He shook his head quickly. No, I'm not here for that. I'm here to thank you. Thank me. Arthur and I weren't close. Family complications, old grudges that didn't matter. But I knew he'd store materials here. Knew he'd hidden something he considered valuable. The estate lawyers sold the building without knowing. I thought everything was lost, that his life's work got scrapped with the building. James gestured at the center, students visible through glass walls, working at sewing stations with focused intensity. Then I heard what you'd done. Turned the factory into a school. Using Arthur's materials to teach people. Keeping craft alive. His voice broke. That's exactly what he would have wanted. Exactly what he hoped for. I came to see if it was true, and it is. You understood what he was trying to save. Maya's throat tightened. He left a letter. Said not to waste it. Said to build something. He was dying when he wrote that. Knew the building would get sold for nothing. Hoped someone desperate or brave enough would find what he'd hidden and understand it mattered. He gave me a chance when I had nothing left. And you gave it forward. James pulled an envelope from his jacket. I brought this. Found it in Arthur's personal effects after he died. Never knew what it meant until now. Inside was a photograph. Arthur Haskell, maybe 40 years old, standing in the same building with a young woman beside him. His daughter, Maya, guessed. Both of them smiling with the unself-conscious joy of people who didn't know tragedy was coming. On the back, in Arthur's precise handwriting, Eleanor and I, 1987. The best year, before everything fell apart. Her name was Eleanor, James said quietly. She died in a car accident in 1999, 28 years old. Arthur never recovered. Threw himself into work, into preserving materials, into building something that would last. I think he hoped she'd somehow see it, somehow know he'd kept going. Maya looked at the photograph, at a daughter's smile and a father's pride, and understood something fundamental about inheritance and legacy and the ways we try to defeat death through what we leave behind. Would you like to see what we're doing with his materials? They walked through the center together. James watched students work with premium fabrics, their hands learning skills that had been practiced here when Eleanor was young. He paused at a display showing finished pieces. Quilts of museum quality. embroidered silk that belonged in galleries, hand-sewn garments that rivaled anything from high-end boutiques. "This is beautiful," he said. "This is what matters." Before leaving, James pressed something into Maya's hand. Keys on a ring, old and worn. Arthur's personal workshop. He had a space in Salem where he'd go to work on private projects. "I've been maintaining it, but never knew what to do with it. Maybe you'll find a use." The workshop was a converted garage behind a house in Salem's historic district. James had kept it locked and preserved exactly as Arthur had left it. Maya entered alone, late on a Saturday afternoon when Emma was at a friend's house, and found Arthur's private world. Ready for part 3? Please let me know when you'd like me to continue with the final section. Continue with part 3. 12:46 p.m. Part 3, 7,000 words. The workshop smelled of machine oil and aged fabric, scents that triggered memories of Maya's years in the textile factory. Afternoon light filtered through dusty windows, illuminating a space that felt frozen in time. Arthur's workspace occupied the entire garage, maybe 20 feet by 30 feet, every surface covered with purpose and care. Industrial sewing machines lined one wall, vintage models maintained with obsessive precision. Thread spools, organized by color, created a rainbow across pegboard. Cutting tables held patterns traced on translucent paper, projects abandoned mid-creation. And on the far wall, framed and carefully preserved, were quilts. Dozens of them, each one a masterpiece of design and execution. Maya approached slowly, recognizing immediately that these weren't commercial products. These were art, personal expression stitched into fabric. The first quilt showed the Haskell Mills factory rendered in silk applique, every window and brick detailed with painstaking accuracy. Workers visible through the windows, tiny figures bent over machines, capturing a moment from the building's history with documentary precision. The second depicted Eleanor, her face composed of thousands of fabric pieces in shades of cream and rose and amber, creating depth and dimension that shouldn't be possible with flat materials. Her smile captured perfectly the same smile from the photograph James had shown. Arthur had spent what must have been hundreds of hours recreating his daughter in fabric, preserving her in a medium that would outlast photographs and memory. Maya moved from quilt to quilt, each one telling a story. The factory through seasons, winter snow on red brick, spring flowers around the loading dock, autumn leaves collecting in corners. Lawrence's history, the immigrant communities that had built the city, textile workers from dozens of countries unified by craft. And in the corner, covered with a sheet, one final quilt larger than the others. She pulled the sheet away carefully. The quilt that emerged was breathtaking in scope. 8 feet by 10 feet, composed of premium fabrics from Arthur's collection, representing what looked like his entire life's work. The center showed Haskell Mills in its prime, surrounded by vignettes of textile work. Hands threading needles, fingers guiding fabric, machinery in motion, the poetry of industrial creation. But around the edges, the images shifted. The factory empty, windows dark, machinery still. Workers scattered to uncertain futures. And at the very bottom, small but deliberate, 2 figures. A woman and a child, standing before the factory, looking up at it with expressions that mixed hope and uncertainty. Arthur had quilted what he hoped would happen. Someone finding his building, bringing it back to life, making it matter again. He'd never seen it come true, but he'd stitched his hope in a fabric anyway. Maya sat on a workbench, surrounded by Arthur's private world, and cried for a man she'd never met who'd given her everything and asked only that she not waste it. Her phone buzzed. Text from Carmen. Emergency at the center. Need you here ASAP. Maya locked the workshop and drove fast, mind spinning through disasters. Fire, structural failure, injury to a student, bureaucratic shutdown, any of the 1,000 things that could destroy what they'd built. She arrived to find Carmen standing outside with 3 police officers and a woman in a business suit. Maya's heart sank. This was it. Some legal challenge, some regulation they'd missed, some reason they couldn't continue. Ms. Chen, the suited woman approached. I'm Catherine Mills from the Massachusetts Department of Economic Development. We need to talk about your operation here. Maya's hands clenched. We have all our permits, all our licenses. Everything's legal. I'm not here about violations. Catherine smiled slightly. I'm here because you've created something remarkable and the state wants to help. The governor's office had noticed the Lawrence Textile Arts Center. In a state hemorrhaging manufacturing jobs, here was a facility training workers in viable skills while preserving historical craft. Catherine explained the state's interest over coffee in Maya's office while the police waited outside, revealed to be security for a visiting state official rather than enforcement. We'd like to feature your center as a model program, provide matching grants for expansion, help you scale the concept to other former mill cities. Fall River, Lowell, New Bedford, they're all struggling with the same issues Lawrence faced. Your approach, training plus community investment plus historical preservation, that's replicable. Maya listened, stunned. You want to give us money? We want to partner with you. The governor's proposing a $10 million initiative for textile heritage preservation and workforce development. Your center would receive 40% to expand operations and establish satellite locations. For $1 million in state funding, the numbers kept growing, kept becoming more impossible. But Maya had learned over the past year that impossible things happened with surprising regularity when you stopped fighting them and started working with them. What would you need from us? Documentation of your model, outcome metrics, student success rates, proof the approach works, then help setting up similar programs in other cities. Carmen spoke up from the doorway where she'd been listening. Our first cohort had 12 students. 11 completed the program. 9 are employed in textile-related fields. 2 started their own businesses. 1 came back as an instructor. Catherine made notes. That's an 83% completion rate and 75% job placement. That's extraordinary for workforce development programs. These aren't just students to us, Maya said. They're people who needed a chance. We make sure they succeed. That's why this works. That's what we want to replicate. Over the next 3 months, Maya worked with state officials to document everything. Curriculum structures, teaching methodologies, student support systems, funding models. They created a blueprint that other cities could adapt, preserving what worked while allowing local flexibility. In March, 18 months after Maya's desperate auction bid, the governor announced the Massachusetts Textile Heritage Initiative at a press conference held at the Lawrence Center. Media filled the first-floor studio. Students demonstrated skills at sewing stations. Carmen explained curriculum to reporters. And Maya stood beside the governor, still uncomfortable with public attention, while he praised her vision and commitment. The questions came rapid-fire. Ms. Chen, how did you fund this center initially? Maya had prepared for this with Rebecca's help. I purchased the building at auction and found preserved textile materials left by the previous owner. Those materials provided startup capital. How much were the materials worth? Enough to renovate the building and operate for the first year while we established the program. She learned to deflect specific numbers. $15 million made better headlines than effective programming, and headlines faded while impact endured. What's your background in education? I worked in textile manufacturing for 5 years before the factory closed. I understand the industry from the worker's perspective, which informs how we teach. A reporter from the Lawrence Eagle-Tribune asked the question Maya had been dreading. A year ago, you were homeless, living in your car with your daughter. Now you're running a multi-million-dollar operation and partnering with the state. How did that transformation happen? The room went silent. Cameras focused. This was the human interest angle everyone wanted. Maya considered her answer carefully. I got desperate enough to take a risk most people would call stupid. I bought a condemned building with money I couldn't afford to spend. And I found something valuable someone had preserved, hoping the right person would find it. I was lucky, but luck only matters if you do something with it. What would you say to other people in desperate situations? That broken things can be fixed if you're willing to work. That second chances exist if you create them. That the system fails people constantly, but that doesn't mean we stop trying to build something better. She paused, looking at the students working behind her, and that you don't have to do it alone. You find people who believe in what you're building, and you work together. The press conference ended with photographs. Maya standing with the governor, with Carmen with students holding finished pieces they'd created. The images would run in newspapers across Massachusetts, reaching people in situations similar to where she'd been, offering proof that transformation was possible. That night, Emma helped hang Arthur's final quilt in the center's main hallway. The massive piece depicting the factory and the mother and child required careful mounting, professional installation. But once in place, lit properly, it became the center's visual mission statement. "Who made this?" Emma asked, studying the tiny stitches with 7-year-old wonder. "The man who owned this building before us. He made it hoping someone would bring the factory back to life. Did he know it would be us?" Maya considered the question. Arthur had died in 2007, 5 years before Emma was born, 7 years before Maya bought the building. But somehow, impossibly, he'd stitched their future into fabric. "I think he hoped it would be someone like us. Someone who needed it as much as the building needed them." The satellite centers opened over the following year. Fall River in an abandoned textile mill similar to Haskell Mills. Lowell in a former cotton processing plant. New Bedford in a building that had once produced fishing nets and sailcloth. Each location followed the Lawrence model. Preserved materials, funding operations, workforce training combined with craft preservation, focus on students who needed second chances. Maya hired directors for each location, prioritizing people with textile experience and personal understanding of hardship. Carmen became regional director, overseeing curriculum across all 4 centers. Patricia Williams, the formerly homeless student from that first class, completed advanced training and became lead instructor in Fall River. Marcus Webb, a veteran who'd found the Lawrence program through the VA, opened the New Bedford Center after completing a teaching certification. The programs evolved beyond original scope. Students created products sold through the center's co-op retail spaces. Quilts, garments, home goods, all made with premium materials and traditional techniques. Prices reflected quality. Customers paid willingly for American-made goods with documented provenance. Revenue supplemented operating costs, moving centers toward sustainability. By year 3, the Massachusetts Textile Heritage Initiative had trained 417 students. 332 completed programs. 281 found employment or started businesses. 37 became instructors, passing skills forward to the next cohort. The numbers told a story of transformation multiplied, second chances compounded, one person's desperate gamble becoming a model for systemic change. But success brought challenges Maya hadn't anticipated. In August, 3 years after buying the factory, she received a letter from the IRS. Not an audit notice, but an inquiry about charitable foundation status. The Lawrence Center operated as a nonprofit, but Maya personally owned the building and remaining textile inventory. The distinction created tax complications that required sophisticated legal maneuvering. Rebecca recommended restructuring. "You should donate the building and remaining materials to a charitable foundation. You get a tax deduction for the donation, and the foundation would own everything, ensuring it continues beyond your involvement." "I'd lose control. You be foundation president. You'd have control through board governance instead of direct ownership. But it would protect the mission long-term and solve the tax issues." Maya thought about Arthur Haskell hiding materials in a basement, hoping someone would understand their value. She thought about the students whose lives had changed because one dying man preserved craft instead of liquidating it. Legacy mattered more than ownership. "Let's do it." The Haskell Mills Foundation incorporated in September. Maya donated the building, valued at $3 million after renovations, plus remaining textile inventory valued at $7.8 million. The donation generated a tax deduction that offset her previous capital gains, creating a complex accounting structure that satisfied IRS requirements while preserving mission focus. The foundation board included Carmen, Rebecca, James Haskell, who'd asked to be involved, 2 former students, and a textile historian for Boston University. Maya remained president, but shared decision-making, creating institutional knowledge that didn't depend on her sole leadership. In October, an unexpected visitor appeared. Jessica Brennan, a documentary filmmaker from New York, wanted to tell the center's story. "I've been following your work for 6 months," Jessica explained over coffee. This is everything wrong with American economic policy and everything right about human resilience in one story. I want to document it properly. Maya's instinct was refusal. Attention felt dangerous, like it might shatter something fragile. But Jessica was persistent. People need to see that the system is broken, but individuals aren't. That one person with courage and luck can create change that ripples outward. Your story does that. It's not just my story. It's Arthur's, it's the students, it's everyone who worked to build this. Exactly. That's what I want to capture. The documentary filmed over 6 months. Cameras followed students through training programs, captured instructors teaching complex skills with patient expertise, documented finished products emerging from traditional techniques. Jessica interviewed Maya extensively, pulling out details about the car, the auction, the moment she found the down chamber, the weight of sudden wealth and responsibility. She interviewed students about their transformations. Patricia spoke about sleeping in shelters and learning to sew, and now teaching others. Marcus described post-deployment struggles and finding purpose in craft. Carmen explained losing her factory job and thinking her skills were worthless until someone proved otherwise. And James Haskell, Arthur's nephew, spoke about his uncle's quiet obsession with preservation. He knew the industry was dying. New skills were being lost. He couldn't stop economic forces, but he could save materials, document techniques, preserve knowledge. He did it thinking maybe someone, someday, would care enough to continue. He never imagined it would work out like this, but he hoped. That hope kept him going. The film premiered at Tribeca Film Festival in April, for years after Maya's auction bid. Jessica titled it The Down Chamber, playing on the literal storage space and the concept of being down, desperate at the bottom. Critics praised its honest portrayal of poverty and resilience, without sentimentality or simplification. The film won the Documentary Audience Award and was acquired by Netflix for streaming distribution. Maya watched it at the premiere beside Emma, now 10 years old and increasingly understanding of what their life had been versus what it had become. On screen, her younger, desperate self sat in the Honda Accord outside that Walmart, making decisions that seemed insane but were actually survival. "Mama, were you really that scared?" Emma whispered during a scene showing Maya's first night in the factory. "More scared than I've ever been before or since. But you did it anyway. Didn't have a choice, baby. Sometimes you do scary things because the alternative is worse." The film's release brought renewed attention. Media requests, speaking invitations, people wanting Maya to consult on other workforce development programs. She accepted selectively, prioritizing substance over publicity, saying yes when she could actually help and no when requests felt extractive. One invitation she couldn't refuse came from the White House. The President's Council on Economic Opportunity wanted her input on manufacturing workforce policy. Maya flew to Washington in June, still uncomfortable in the professional clothes Rebecca had insisted she buy, still feeling like an imposter in rooms full of people with advanced degrees and important titles. But when she spoke about textile training and second-chance employment and the human cost of factory closures, the room listened. Her expertise came from experience, not credentials, and that carried-weight credentials couldn't match. The Council incorporated several of her recommendations into national policy proposals. Tax incentives for companies hiring from workforce development programs. Grants for preserving manufacturing heritage sites. Student loan forgiveness for people entering trades. Small changes in massive systems, but changes that would affect thousands of lives. Flying home, Maya thought about chain reactions and compound effects. Arthur preserving materials that funded a center that trained students who started businesses that employed others who sent their kids to college who became teachers and engineers and doctors. One man's desperate hope creating ripples that spread farther than he could have imagined. Back in Lawrence, the center hummed with activity. Summer session had 40 students, largest cohort yet. New instructor positions meant competitive hiring. The retail co-op had a 6-month backlog on custom orders. And Maya's office held stacks of applications from other states wanting to replicate the model. She sat at Arthur's desk, now hers but still feeling borrowed, and reviewed expansion proposals. Oregon wanted a center in Portland. North Carolina proposed 3 locations in former furniture manufacturing cities. Michigan requested consultation for automotive heritage preservation, combining similar principles. Each proposal represented potential impact, jobs created, skills preserved, lives transformed. Each also represented responsibility, oversight, the risk that rapid expansion would dilute quality. Carmen knocked and entered, carrying coffee and concern. You're doing that thing where you try to solve every problem yourself. Maya smiled despite exhaustion. Learned behavior. Hard to break. You got a board now. Staff who know what they're doing. You can delegate. Delegating means trusting other people won't mess it up. Delegating means building something that survives beyond you. Arthur did that. Now you need to do it too. The observation hit hard because it was true. Maya had been operating like someone who might lose everything again, holding tight to control, unable to trust that the foundation she'd built would stand without her constant oversight. You're right, she admitted. I need to let go more. Start by taking a vacation. When's the last time you and Emma did something just for fun? Maya couldn't remember. The past 4 years have been constant work, building and expanding and documenting and fighting to maintain what they created. Emma deserved better than a mother whose entire identity was wrapped up in obligation and legacy. Where should we go? Somewhere with no textile factories. Beach, maybe. Mountains. Anywhere you can turn off your phone and remember you're human. They went to Maine in August, rented a cabin on a lake, spent 2 weeks swimming and reading and doing absolutely nothing productive. Emma learned to paddleboard. Maya remembered how to relax without guilt. They talked about normal things, favorite foods and funny movies, and whether Emma wanted to try soccer in the fall. On the last night, sitting on the cabin's porch watching sunset paint the lake in shades of amber and rose, Emma asked a question she'd been building toward all week. Mama, are you happy now? The question deserved consideration. Maya thought about the car, the fear, the moment she'd placed that desperate bid. She thought about finding the down chamber, Arthur's letter, the weight of sudden responsibility. She thought about students whose lives had changed, businesses created, skills preserved, second chances given and taken and multiplied forward. Yeah, baby. I'm happy now. Good. Emma leaned against her shoulder. You deserve to be happy. So do you. Are you? Mostly. Sometimes I still remember being scared. But then I remember we're safe now, and it gets better. They sat in comfortable silence while the lake darkened and stars emerged. Somewhere in Massachusetts, the centers operated without them. Students learned, instructors taught, fabric transformed under skilled hands. The work continued because they'd built something larger than one person's effort. September brought Emma's first day of 5th grade and Maya's return to Lawrence. The center had functioned perfectly without her, which should have felt threatening, but actually felt like success. She'd built systems that worked independent of her constant presence. That was the point. Legacy meant continuation, not control. October delivered an unexpected gift. A letter arrived from a law firm in Boston, thick with legal documents and a cover note explaining that Arthur Haskell had established a trust before his death, separate from his estate, containing one final surprise. The trust held stock certificates for a technology company Arthur had invested in during the 1980s. The company had grown modestly for decades, then exploded in value during the pandemic as remote work technology became essential. Arthur's original $50,000 investment had appreciated to $12 million. The trust terms specified the funds should go to whoever demonstrates faithful stewardship of Haskell Mills and continues its mission of craft preservation and community service. Rebecca reviewed the documents carefully. This is legitimate. Arthur set it up 30 years ago with very specific conditions. The trust administrators have been watching your work with the centers. You've met every condition he specified. The $12 million is yours, or rather, the foundation's if you want to donate it. Maya sat with Arthur's letter, the original one she'd found in the down chamber, now preserved in an archival frame on her office wall. She read it again, understanding more with each year that passed. He kept hoping even when hope didn't make sense. Kept building even when he'd lost everything that mattered to him personally. kept preserving and planning and trusting that someone would care. And someone did, Rebecca said softly. You cared. You honored what he built. Now he's honoring you back, even from the grave. The 12 million allowed expansion Maya had considered impossible. 5 new centers opened over the following 18 months. Detroit, Philadelphia, Baltimore, Atlanta, Cleveland. Former manufacturing cities with similar stories of collapse and communities desperate for renewal. Each center followed the model, preserved materials or secured initial funding, workforce training combined with craft preservation, focus on second-chance employment for people the system had failed. Each center hired locally, prioritizing instructors with industry experience and personal understanding of hardship. Within 2 years, the Haskell Mills Foundation operated 13 centers across 8 states. Annual enrollment exceeded 1,000 students. Completion rates held steady at 80+%. Employment outcomes remained strong, 70 to 80% job placement within 6 months of program completion. The foundation employed 217 people full-time, most of them formerly unemployed or underemployed, all of them earning living wages with benefits. And the ripple effects multiplied beyond direct measurement. Students started businesses that employed others. Instructors trained the next generation who trained the generation after that. Communities around the centers revitalized as economic activity returned. Former factory buildings became gathering spaces, symbols of transformation rather than decline. Maya turned 35 in December, 7 years after buying Haskell Mills. The foundation threw a celebration at the Lawrence Center, students and staff and board members gathering to mark both her birthday and the program's anniversary. Carmen presented a quilt created by advanced students, depicting Maya's journey from the car to the factory to the national network of centers. The stitching was museum quality, every detail rendered with care and skill and love. We made this to say thank you, Carmen explained, for seeing possibility when everyone else saw nothing, for giving us chances we didn't think existed, for building something that keeps giving chances to others. Maya cried, which happened more easily now that she'd learned emotion was strength rather than weakness. Emma, now 13 and growing into someone confident and capable, hugged her mother while the crowd applauded. That night, after everyone left, Maya walked through the quiet center alone. She paused at each station, remembering when these spaces had held debris and decay instead of possibility. She stood in the down chamber, now climate-controlled storage for materials that supplied 13 centers, and thought about Arthur's obsessive preservation creating opportunities he'd never witness. She climbed to what had been their third-floor office, the place where she and Emma had camped that first freezing week, and looked out newly installed windows at Lawrence's lights spreading toward darkness. 7 years ago, she'd been desperate and homeless and terrified. She'd gambled everything on a building that should have been worthless. She'd found fortune she didn't expect and responsibility she didn't ask for. She'd built something that mattered because someone she'd never met believed broken things could be fixed. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her click accept. Is this Maya, Chen? Elderly woman's voice, unfamiliar. Yes. My name is Dorothy Martinez. I hope you don't mind me calling. I got your number from the foundation website. How can I help you, Ms. Martinez? I'm 92 years old. I worked at Haskell Mills from 1951 to 1983. 32 years on the floor, making pillows and comforters. Best job I ever had. When the factory closed, it broke my heart. Maya's chest tightened. I'm sorry for what you lost. I'm not calling about what I lost, dear. I'm calling about what you found. I saw the documentary. I've read articles about the centers. I wanted to tell you that what you're doing, keeping those skills alive, teaching young people, honoring what the factory meant to people like me. Arthur would have been so proud. You knew him and Eleanor both. Watched her grow up running through the factory floor, asking questions about everything. Arthur loved that building and everyone in it. When Eleanor died, he couldn't find joy in the work anymore, but he couldn't abandon it either. He preserved everything, hoping, Dorothy's voice broke, hoping someone would care enough to continue. And you did. You cared. They talked for an hour. Dorothy shared memories of the factory in its prime, of workers from dozen countries unified by craft, of Arthur's exacting standards and surprising kindness. She described Eleanor's curiosity and brightness, the daughter who'd been Arthur's whole world until a drunk driver ended her life at 28. He never recovered, Dorothy said. But he kept working, kept preserving, kept hoping that maybe, somehow, the factory's legacy would matter to someone. I think he'd be amazed by what you've built. I wish I could have met him. Me too, dear. But maybe this is better. You met him through what he left behind. You understood what he couldn't say in words, but stitched in a fabric and sealed in chambers and preserved against every instinct to just give up and let it all end. After the call ended, Maya sat in the quiet office thinking about connection across time. Arthur preserving materials in 2007. Maya finding them in 2017. Students learning from them in 2024. Skills passing forward through decades because one man refused to let them die and one woman refused to let his hope be wasted. She pulled out her laptop and wrote an email to the foundation board. Proposal: establish the Arthur and Eleanor Haskell Memorial Scholarship. Full tuition plus living stipend for students demonstrating exceptional need and commitment to craft preservation. Funding from Foundation Endowment. Goal: ensure no student is turned away for financial reasons, ever. She hit send and watched the email disappear into the digital network, connecting 13 centers across 8 states, reaching people who would implement the scholarship and people who would receive it and people whose lives would change because of it. Chain reactions and compound effects. One man's hope multiplied across years and lives and communities. Maya closed her laptop and stood. The center was silent, peaceful, full of the potential energy that existed in spaces dedicated to transformation. Tomorrow, students would fill these rooms. Fabric would flow through machines. Skills would transfer from experienced hands to learning ones. The work would continue because they'd built something that mattered. She turned off the lights and locked the door. Outside, December wind carried the smell of snow coming. Lawrence's streets spread quiet in the late hour, former factory buildings standing dark against the winter sky. Some were abandoned still, waiting for someone to see possibility in their decay. Others had found new purposes, transformed by people who refused to accept that endings were permanent. Maya walked to her car, a sensible Subaru now instead of the dying Honda, and drove toward the house she owned outright in North Andover. Emma would be asleep, warm and safe, dreaming 13-year-old dreams about high school and friends and the future that stretched before her without the shadow of poverty and fear. The drive took 20 minutes through empty streets. Maya thought about the route she used to drive in the opposite direction, fleeing eviction toward an auction that made no sense. She thought about the $700 that bought 40,000 square feet of decay and $15 million of preserved materials and one dying man's desperate hope. She thought about second chances and broken things and the peculiar grace of being in exactly the right place at exactly the right moment, even when that place was rock bottom and that moment was desperation. Sometimes the worst decisions turn out to be the best ones. Sometimes gambling everything on nothing was the only rational choice. Sometimes broken things fix themselves if you gave them time and care and refused to accept that damage was permanent. The house was dark, quiet, warm. Maya checked on Emma, sleeping peacefully under a quilt students had made, safe in ways her mother hadn't been able to guarantee 7 years ago. She stood in the doorway, watching her daughter breathe, feeling the weight of everything that had changed and everything that had stayed the same. They'd survived. More than survived. They'd built something that helped others survive. That was enough. That was everything. Maya closed Emma's door softly and walked to her own room. She kept Arthur's original letter on her nightstand, preserved in its archival frame, read it most nights before sleeping. Tonight the words felt particularly resonant. Don't waste it. Build something with it. Help people with it. Be braver than I was. Be kinder than I was. Be better than I was. She tried. God knows she tried. Built 13 centers, trained thousands of students, employed hundreds, preserved skills that were being lost. She'd taken Arthur's hope and multiplied it forward, compound interest on belief. Whether that made her better than him was unclear, but it made her worthy of what he'd given. That had to count for something. Sleep came easily, dreamless and deep. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new students, new opportunities to extend second chances to people who needed them. The work would continue because the work was never finished. There were always more broken things to fix, more people to help, more hope to preserve against the grinding indifference of systems that failed the vulnerable. But tonight, in a warm house with a sleeping daughter and a foundation that would outlast her, Chen allowed herself something she'd rarely permitted over the past 7 years. Satisfaction, pride in what had been built, certainty that Arthur's desperate gamble on the future had paid off beyond anything he could have imagined. The down chamber in Lawrence stayed locked and climate-controlled, still holding materials worth millions. But the real fortune wasn't fabric or gold or cash. The real fortune was possibility preserved, hope maintained, belief that broken things could be fixed if someone cared enough to try. Arthur had believed it alone in his grief and isolation. Maya had proven it in community and action. And somewhere in America tonight, someone else was placing a desperate bid on something worthless, gambling everything on nothing, making the kind of decision that would either destroy them or save them. Maybe they'd find fortune hidden by someone they'd never meet. Maybe they'd just find shelter and have to build fortune themselves. Either way, the Haskell Mills Foundation would be there, offering training and support and the kind of second chances that transformed lives. Because that was the real inheritance Arthur had left. Not materials or money, but methodology. Not wealth, but a blueprint for creating it through preservation and education, and refusing to accept that people were disposable just because the economy had disposed of them. Maya's last thought before sleep was gratitude. For Arthur's hope, for her own desperation, for the cosmic accident that brought them together across time, for broken things that fixed themselves when given the chance, for second chances that became third and fourth and infinite, rippling forward through lives and communities and generations, for the impossible moment when $700 bought everything that mattered. 5 years passed like pages turning in a book Maya had never expected to write. The Haskell Mills Foundation expanded beyond even her revised expectations, operating 27 centers across 14 states by 2029. But growth brought complications that success in smaller scale had hidden. The phone call came on a Tuesday morning in March. Maya was reviewing quarterly reports when her assistant knocked urgently. Director Chen, there's a situation in the Detroit Center. James Calloway on the line. Says it's critical. James ran the Detroit location, a former automotive upholstery plant they converted 3 years earlier. Solid manager, experienced instructor, not prone to exaggeration. Maya took the call immediately. James, what's happening? We've got a student situation. Requires your direct involvement. His voice carried tension Maya recognized from her own years managing crisis. 19-year-old named Destiny. Brooks came through our standard intake last month. Completed 2 weeks of training. Then yesterday, she disclosed something our local protocols don't cover. Maya's chest tightened. Student crises were the hardest part of running programs for people emerging from trauma. What did she disclose? She's been living in the center. Nights, weekends, anytime we're closed. She's been sleeping in the storage room, using the bathroom facilities, basically treating this like a shelter. Security footage confirms she's been here every night for 2 weeks. Is she in danger? Does she need immediate housing assistance? It's more complicated than that. James paused. She's 17, not 19 like her application stated. False ID, forged documents. And she's approximately 7 months pregnant. Maya closed her eyes. 17, pregnant, homeless, lying to access a program designed for adults. Every part of that sentence represented systemic failure and individual desperation in equal measure. Where is she now? Still here. I haven't confronted her directly. Wanted your guidance before taking action that might push her away. That was why James was excellent at his job. He understood that rules existed to serve people, not the reverse. I'm coming to Detroit. Today. Don't confront her yet, but don't let her leave either. Make sure she has food, and knows she's safe. I'll be there by this afternoon. The flight from Boston to Detroit took 2 hours. Maya used the time to research Michigan's laws regarding minors, emancipation, prenatal care, and housing assistance. The legal landscape was complex, full of gaps, where people like Destiny fell through into invisibility. Rebecca Tan, now the Foundation's general counsel with an office in Boston, joined the call mid-flight. Maya, this is delicate. If we knowingly house a minor without parental consent, we could face legal exposure. But if we turn her away, we're abandoning someone in crisis. What if she's emancipated? Then she's legally an adult, and we're fine. But emancipation requires court proceedings. Most 17-year-olds don't have the resources or knowledge to navigate that process. Maya stared out the airplane window at clouds that looked solid enough to walk on. There has to be a way to help her that doesn't violate laws designed to protect minors. There is. We get her proper legal representation. We help her navigate emancipation proceedings, if appropriate. We connect her with prenatal care and housing assistance. We do all the things we do for an adult student, but with legal oversight to ensure we're not overstepping. That takes time. Where does she stay while we sort this out? Rebecca's silence was answer enough. The gaps between needing help and receiving it were where people disappeared, where good intentions met bureaucratic reality and lost. The Detroit Center occupied a former automotive interior manufacturing plant in the Eastern Market District. For stories of renovated industrial space, large windows letting in March sunlight, students visible through glass working at sewing stations with focused intensity. Maya arrived at 3 p.m. to find James waiting in his office with a young woman who looked simultaneously defiant and terrified. Destiny Brooks was small, maybe 5'3", with dark skin and braided hair pulled into a practical bun. Her pregnancy was obvious despite the oversized sweatshirt she wore. Her eyes tracked Maya with the hypervigilance of someone accustomed to threats emerging from unexpected directions. Destiny, I'm Maya Chen. I run the foundation that operates this center. Maya sat across from her rather than behind the desk, eliminating physical barriers. James told me you've been staying here at night. I didn't damage anything, didn't steal anything, just needed somewhere warm and safe. Her voice was steady, but her hand shook slightly. I know I lied on my application about my age, but I need this training. Need a way to support my baby when she comes. She? Ultrasound, said girl. Due in May. Destiny's hand moved to her stomach protectively. I'm not giving her up. I don't care what anyone says. She's mine, and I'm keeping her. Maya recognized the defensive posture, the expectation of judgment and rejection. She'd worn it herself 7 years ago, sitting in government offices being told her choices were limited and her situation was her own fault. I'm not here to take your baby or judge your decisions. I'm here to figure out how we help you. Destiny's eyes filled. People don't help. People give speeches about responsibility and consequences, and then they walk away. Some people do that. We don't. Maya leaned forward. But I need honesty from you. Complete honesty. Can you do that? Destiny nodded slowly. Where are your parents? Mom died when I was 14. Ovarian cancer. Dad's been in prison since I was 12. Armed robbery. He's got 8 more years. Other family? Foster care since Mom died. 5 different placements in 3 years. Last family was... She paused, jaw clenching. The dad started coming to my room at night. I reported it. Nobody believed me. They said I was troubled, acting out for attention. So I left. Maya's hands clenched in her lap. The system that was supposed to protect children had failed this girl so completely that homelessness was safer than the alternative. How long have you been on your own? For months. Since I found out about the baby. Knew if I stayed in foster care, they'd try to make me give her up, or they'd take her when she was born. Couldn't let that happen. The baby's father? Gone. Said he'd support me, then blocked my number when I told him I was keeping her. Destiny's voice was matter of fact. No self-pity, just reporting facts. I've been staying in shelters, sometimes with friends, sometimes in my car when I had one before it got repossessed. Found this program online. Knew I needed skills, needed a way to earn money legally. So I lied about my age and applied. Maya absorbed this, feeling the weight of every failure that had led Destiny to this moment. The training program is designed for adults, but I think we can make an exception given your circumstances. However, we need to do this properly, legally, so we can actually help you long-term. I can't go back into the system. I won't. Panic edged into Destiny's voice. I'm not suggesting that. I'm suggesting we get you a lawyer who can help you file for emancipation. In Michigan, pregnant minors can petition for emancipated status if they can demonstrate ability to support themselves. Our program gives you that demonstration. You're learning marketable skills, showing commitment to education, proving you can manage adult responsibilities. Destiny stared. You'd help me do that? Even though I lied. You lied because the system failed you and you were trying to survive. That's not a moral failing. That's rational adaptation to impossible circumstances. Maya pulled out her phone. I'm going to make some calls. While I do that, James is going to take you to get something to eat. Real food, not vending machine dinner. Then we're going to figure out where you stay tonight that's safe and legal while we sort everything else out. Rebecca connected Maya with a family law attorney in Detroit who specialized in emancipation cases. Sarah Okonkwo listened to Destiny's situation and agreed to take the case pro bono, recognizing the stakes. We can file the petition this week. In the meantime, Destiny needs stable housing. Does the foundation have resources for that? Maya thought about the foundation's budget, the emergency assistance fund they maintain for exactly these situations. We can cover short-term housing, hotel, or extended stay facility. What matters is keeping her safe and in the program while we work through legal proceedings. The hearing happened 3 weeks later. Destiny sat beside Sarah in Wayne County Family Court while a judge reviewed her petition for emancipation. The evidence was straightforward. No viable family placement, demonstrated ability to support herself through employment training, pregnancy requiring adult decision-making capacity, history of foster care failures. Maya testified about the program, Destiny's performance, her commitment and capability. She's in the top quarter of her cohort despite being the youngest student we've ever had. She's learning advanced techniques, showing up every day, managing her pregnancy and her education simultaneously. She's more mature than many adults I've worked with. The judge, an older black woman with kind eyes and a reputation for practical rulings, asked Destiny directly, "Why do you want emancipation instead of working within the foster care system to get support?" Destiny's answer was simple and devastating. "The system didn't keep me safe, Your Honor. I reported abuse, and nobody believed me. I can't trust them with my daughter. I need to be able to make decisions about her care without anyone having power over us." The judge granted emancipation that afternoon. Destiny Brooks, at 17, became legally an adult with full rights to make decisions about her life and her child's future. Maya watched her walk out of the courthouse, standing taller, shoulders back, carrying documentation that transformed her from a runaway minor to an emancipated adult enrolled in a workforce development program. "What happens now?" Destiny asked, standing on the courthouse steps in March wind. "Now you finish your training. We help you find stable housing before the baby comes. We connect you with prenatal care and delivery planning. We make sure you have everything you need to succeed." Maya paused, "And then you help us figure out how to serve other young people in similar situations. Because you're not the only teenager who's fallen through the gaps." That conversation led to the Foundation's Youth Pathways Initiative, launched in January 2030. The program created specialized tracks for emancipated minors and young adults aging out of foster care, providing not just vocational training, but comprehensive support, housing assistance, childcare, healthcare coordination, legal advocacy, mental health services. Destiny became the initiative's first success story and later its youth coordinator. She completed textile training 2 weeks before giving birth to her daughter Amara in May. She returned to classes 6 weeks later, Amara in the center's new childcare facility, and completed her certification in August. By September, she was working full-time at a Detroit-based sustainable fashion company, making $18 an hour with benefits. By December, she'd save enough for a security deposit on a small apartment. And in February 2031, she stood before the Foundation's board of directors presenting data on youth homelessness and program design recommendations. There are thousands of young people like I was, she said, voice steady, professional, transformed. 17, 18, 19 years old, aged out of foster care, or running from abuse, or pregnant and alone. The system calls them troubled youth and writes them off. But they're not troubled. They're traumatized, and they need what I got. Skills, stability, someone who believes they can succeed. The board approved expanding youth pathways to all 27 centers. Within a year, the initiative served 473 young people. Completion rates were lower than adult programs, 68% versus 83%, but outcomes for those who completed were exceptional. Young people who'd been written off by every system designed to help them learn trades, found employment, built stable lives. Maya watched this expansion with pride, mixed with exhaustion. She was 42 now, had been running the foundation for 14 years, had built something that employed over 600 people and trained thousands. But the work was relentless, the needs were infinite, and she was tired in ways that sleep didn't fix. Emma, now 18 and finishing her freshman year at Boston University, noticed during spring break. They were having dinner at the North Andover house, just the two of them, when Emma said carefully, "Mom, when's the last time you took a vacation?" Maya tried to remember. "We went to Maine that one summer." "That was 7 years ago." "I meant recently. I take weekends off sometimes." Emma's look was pure skepticism. "You answer emails and take calls all weekend. That's not time off." She paused. "You've built something amazing, but it's eating you alive. You need to step back before there's nothing left of you except the work." The observation stung because it was accurate. Maya had poured herself into the foundation so completely that she'd stopped existing separately from it. Her identity was director. Her purpose was expansion. Her worth was measured in centers opened and students served. "I don't know how to step back. Too many people depend on this." They depend on the foundation. They don't depend on you personally running everything. That's what staff is for. That's what delegation means. Emma reached across the table, took her mother's hand. "You taught me that broken things can be fixed. But Mom, you can't fix everything. And trying will break you." That night, Maya sat alone in her home office looking at organizational charts and budget spreadsheets and strategic plans extending 5 years into the future. Emma was right. She'd built the foundation to be sustainable beyond her leadership, but she'd never actually tested whether it could function without her constant involvement. The next board meeting, Maya proposed a radical idea. "I want to take a sabbatical. 6 months. Starting in August." The room went silent. Rebecca spoke first. "Maya, the foundation needs your leadership. The foundation needs to prove it can function without my daily leadership. We've built excellent staff, strong systems, clear mission. But I'm still operating like I'm the only person who can make decisions. That's not sustainable, and it's not healthy." She looked around the table at people who'd helped build this from nothing. "I'm not leaving. I'm testing whether we've built something that survives beyond one person's involvement. Arthur did that with his materials. I need to do it with the organization." Carmen was next. "Where would you go? What would you do?" "I don't know yet. Maybe travel. Maybe just be home reading books and remembering what it feels like to exist without crisis management." Maya smiled slightly. "Maybe figure out who Maya Chen is when she's not Director Chen." The board approved with conditions. Maya would remain available for emergencies, would check in monthly, would return if the organization faced existential threats. But day-to-day operations would flow through Carmen as interim director, with Rebecca handling legal issues and the executive team managing their respective domains. Maya's sabbatical began in August 2031. The first week was torture. She checked email compulsively, called Carmen daily, hovered over operations she'd promised to leave alone. But Carmen was firm. "Maya, go be a person. We got this." The second week, Maya drove to Maine with Emma, now on summer break. They returned to the same lake, rented the same cabin, spent days swimming and talking and being mother and daughter instead of director and college student. "This is nice," Emma said one evening, both of them watching sunset paint water in impossible colors. "Having you actually present instead of distracted by work. I'm sorry I've been absent even when I was there. You were saving people. That mattered. But you matter too, Mom. Not just what you build, but who you are. The third week, Maya visited Arthur's workshop in Salem. James Haskell had maintained it perfectly, keeping the space exactly as his uncle had left it. Maya spent hours there, studying Arthur's quilts, reading his journals, understanding more deeply the man who'd changed her life without ever meeting her. One journal entry stopped her. Written in 2005, 2 years before Arthur died. Eleanor would have been 43 today. I wonder what she'd think of what I'm doing, preserving materials that no one values anymore. Sometimes I think I'm just a crazy old man hiding treasures like a dragon in a cave. But then I remember her curiosity, her belief that beautiful things deserve protection. Maybe someone will find this someday and understand. Maybe it matters, even if I never see it matter. Maya sat on Arthur's workbench, crying for a man who died, not knowing his hope had been justified. His preservation had mattered. His materials had transformed thousands of lives. She pulled out her phone and recorded a voice memo, something she'd been thinking about for months. Note to self, commission a documentary about Arthur, not about the foundation or the centers, about him, his life, his loss, his decision to preserve instead of destroy. Tell his story properly, so Eleanor is remembered too. The fourth week, Maya did something she hadn't done in 14 years. She took a sewing class, not as director or teacher or expert, but as a student learning embroidery techniques from an instructor at the Lawrence Center who didn't know who she was. Sitting at a station, following instructions, making mistakes, and fixing them. Creating something with her hands instead of managing others creating, reconnected her to why this work mattered. The instructor, an older Vietnamese woman named Lynn, praised Maya's progress. You have good hands. Patient. What did you learn to sew? I worked in a textile factory years ago. Quality control mostly. Never did the artistic part. It's never too late to learn new skills. That's what I tell all my students. Age doesn't matter. Interest and effort matter. Lynn smiled. You should keep coming. You have potential. Maya returned the next week and the week after that. Anonymous student among others learning traditional techniques. She created an embroidered piece showing the Honda Accord she'd lived in, Emma sleeping in the back seat. Both of them safe in threadwork and memory. The piece wasn't museum quality, but it was hers, created by her own hands, representing her own story. By October, 3 months into sabbatical, Maya realized something fundamental. The foundation was functioning beautifully without her. Carmen was an excellent director, perhaps better than Maya, because she delegated more easily and trusted staff more fully. Programs continued, students succeeded, expansion proceeded on schedule. The organization didn't need Maya's constant oversight. It needed her vision and values, which were embedded in structure and culture. But the daily operations belonged to people who were entirely capable of managing them. The realization was simultaneously liberating and terrifying. If the foundation didn't need her constant involvement, who was she? What was her purpose beyond the work she defined herself through? Emma visited in November during Thanksgiving break. They cooked dinner together, just the two of them, in a kitchen that Maya had barely used because she was always working late at the foundation offices. You look different, Emma observed, chopping vegetables while Maya prepared turkey. Lighter somehow. I think I forgot how to be a person who wasn't constantly fixing problems. I'm remembering. Is it good? The remembering? Maya considered this. It's uncomfortable. Turns out I used work as a way to avoid dealing with everything else. Grief about the years we struggled. Fear that I'd lose everything again. Guilt about having so much when others have nothing. And now I'm learning that I can feel those things without drowning in them. That taking care of myself doesn't mean abandoning people who need help. Maya paused, meeting her daughter's eyes. You were right. I was breaking myself trying to fix everything. I needed to step back. The sabbatical ended in January 2032, but Maya returned to a different role. She remained foundation president, but shifted from day-to-day operations to strategic development and major initiatives. Carmen continued as executive director, managing the organization's operations with skill and confidence. Maya focused on what she did best: vision, storytelling, connecting the foundation's work to larger movements for economic justice and second-chance employment. She also started writing, not reports or grant proposals, but a book about the journey from desperate auction bid to national foundation. About Arthur's story and hers, about textile heritage and economic collapse, about second chances and the ways broken things fix themselves when given time and care. The book, titled The Down Chamber, One Building, Two Strangers, and the Fortune That Changed Everything, published in August 2033. Critics praised its honest portrayal of poverty and systemic failure without sentimentality. It became a New York Times bestseller, not because of dramatic narrative, but because it told truth people recognized. The book's proceeds, substantial given its success, went entirely to the foundation's endowment. Maya took nothing personally, already having more money than she needed. But the book's real impact was broader conversation. Politicians cited it in debates about workforce development. Economists referenced it in papers about post-industrial economies. Social workers assigned it in training programs about trauma-informed practice. And most importantly, people in desperate situations read it and recognized themselves, understood that transformation was possible, that broken things could be fixed. Destiny Brooks, now 22 and Youth Pathways coordinator, wrote Maya after reading it. "You made me cry 6 times, especially the part about placing the bid and not knowing if you'd made the best decision or the worst one. That's how I felt lying on my application. Didn't know if I was saving myself or destroying the one chance I had. Thank you for telling the truth about how scary hope is." That letter, more than any review or sales figure, confirmed the book mattered. Not because it was well-written or commercially successful, but because it gave language to experiences people thought were uniquely shameful. Desperation, bad decisions made from good motives, the terror of gambling everything on uncertain outcomes. By the fall of 2033, 15 years after Maya's auction bid, the Haskell Mills Foundation operated 34 centers across 17 states. Annual enrollment exceeded 2,000 students. The organization employed over 900 people. The endowment, carefully grown through strategic asset liquidation and book proceeds, held $47 million, enough to sustain operations indefinitely. But Maya's proudest achievement wasn't measured in numbers. It was measured in transformed lives compounding forward. Students who became instructors who trained the next generation. Single parents who built stable lives and raised children who went to college. Young people who aged out of foster care and found family in classroom communities. Communities revitalized around centers that became gathering spaces and symbols of possibility. Arthur Haskell's desperate hope, preserved in climate-controlled basement, had multiplied into something he couldn't have imagined. Not just because the materials were valuable, but because the right person found them at the right moment and understood they represented more than money. They represented belief that craft mattered, that skills deserved preservation, that broken things could be fixed, that people deserved second chances. Maya stood in the Lawrence Center one December evening, 15 years almost to the day after she bought the building. Students worked at stations around her, fabric flowing through machines, hands learning patterns practiced for generations. The down chamber below held materials still, but now they supplied a network of centers teaching thousands. And on the wall, Arthur's final quilt showed a mother and child before a factory, looking up with hope and uncertainty. The prophecy stitched into fabric, finally fulfilled, continuing forward into futures Arthur would never see, but had made possible through preservation and faith. Maya pulled out her phone and texted Emma, still at the center. "Working late, but in a good way. Love you." The response came immediately. "Love you too, Mom. Don't stay too late. Broken things need rest to stay fixed." Maya smiled, turned off her office light, and walked through the quiet center toward home. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new students, new opportunities to extend second chances. But tonight, in a building that had been worthless and was now priceless, that had been broken and was now whole, Maya Chen allowed herself something she'd earned through years of work and worry and hope. Peace. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you love this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.